Good morning, Internet. I am America's favorite sports politics podcaster extraordinaire, Russ Simmons here, two-time Pulitzer Prize winner. And I am joined by a not-so-special guest today who still lives with his mother. Caleb, say hi to everybody, why don't you?
I'm Caleb McClennial. And if this goes well, I'm not going to live with Mom anymore. All right.
We'll see about that. Today, we are ranking 16 presidents on their foreign policy, 16 prominent American history figures, 16 men who changed the world. Let's see how this goes out. Caleb, you want to introduce the first group? No, you don't. You're passive. The first round we're doing is Bush Jr. versus Teddy Roosevelt. Now, these two are some very big figures in political American history, the first of which is more recent, the last of which, well, isn't very. Let's see how this goes out. In the first round, Bush Jr., he did start the Iraqi War. Wasn't a success. It was very messy. On the other hand, Teddy Roosevelt, with his soft-speakingness and his large stick, helped liberate Cuba with the Rough Riders. Although that was before his presidency, it was much more successful than Bush's Iraqi War, much less messy. And the liberation of Cuba, as we know today, went very well. So the winner for that match is Teddy Roosevelt.
That was good, Russ. I like that.
You're weird. Okay, round two. Bush Sr. versus JFK. Another toughie. Bush Sr. met with Gorbachev, officially ended the Cold War, which is good, except he allowed Saddam Hussein to rule in the Middle East after his invasions. Kennedy, on the other hand, passed a limited test ban treaty, which forbade foreign countries from testing nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, and they had to do it on the ground. I know it's forbade, not forbidden, Caleb. Jesus. So for the reasons that Bush Sr. allowed Saddam Hussein to rule after he left the Middle East, we have the winner as John F. Kennedy. You have something you want to say, Caleb?
No, Russ.
That's what I thought.
I'm good.
All right.
I like the lava lamp. I like how it looks.
Do you want me to put the lava lamp away, Caleb?
No, sir.
Okay. Next round we have is Ronald Reagan versus Barack Obama. Another two big figureheads in American history. Let's see how this works out. This one might be tough. Reagan attacked the Soviet Union head-on, called them an evil empire, said we won't be afraid to attack you if we need to. Obama, during his administration, Bin Laden died, which is a big plus for foreign policies all around the world. However, one of the big minuses is that problem we still have to the modern day. He let North Korea build up their nuclear arsenal a little bit too much, and for that reason we have Reagan taking home the W. Right, the final...
Dub. They say dub, not W.
Do you want to leave right now?
No, sir.
That's what I thought. Okay, sorry about that. The last matchup we have for the first 8 presidents on our list is Lyndon B. Johnson versus Dwight D. Eisenhower. Let's see how this one works out. LBJ comes in strong with the Pueblo incident. He risks his political career to save some good old U.S. troops off of good old U.S. soil. Eisenhower, he supported coup d'etats all around the world, which on one hand can be viewed as good on how they turned out, but on the other hand is a little shifty under the political radar, so we're giving this dub to Lyndon B. Johnson.
You got that right.
Now we're taking it over to Caleb. With his 8. Here you go, his nose.
No, you.
I don't want it.
Okay. Thanks, Russ. So we're going to start out at the top. This is probably our weakest division in the top left up there. We have Jimmy Carter versus the 1920s Republicans. The Republicans of the 20s we're defining them as Coolidge.
Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. I told you that before we started, all right?
I'm sorry, Russ.
No. Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay. Don't fire me, please. Okay. So we have the positive side of Carter's foreign policy was that he was successful in negotiating the Camp David Accords, which was a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, and brought a little bit of a reduction to some of the chaos in the Middle East at the time. And another good point for the 1920s Republicans is that during Coolidge's administration, he was successful in signing the Kellogg-Briand Pact.
That's pretty cool of you, Coolidge.
It's not
Just keep
funny.
going. Keep
It's
going. Keep going. Somebody.
okay. So he was successful in getting nations to sign the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which was it was essentially an outlawed violent means to end disagreements between nations, and we all know that worked out perfectly. See, that was a better
I
joke.
like that. Just keep going, all right?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Just hurry up. All right?
All right, but it was a good thing. But the reason why we're eliminating Carter is because he was seen as kind of ineffectual in resolving the Iranian hostage crisis. And in fact, that the hostages were not even released until Reagan's inauguration in 1980. All right, moving on. Next round, we have Bill Clinton versus.
Talk the thing? Forget. Oh, I'm gonna keep this. Sorry.
I
Just a
told
little
you.
in. That's going on your record, okay? Now keep going.
Is Mom gonna see?
Keep going.
Okay. Next up, we have Bill Clinton versus the administrations of Nixon and Ford. So, Bill Clinton was successful in restoring a democracy peacefully on the island of Haiti, and Nixon and Ford were also successful in that. I'm not sure which one of them it was, but they were able to engage the Soviet Union in what is commonly known as SALT, which was Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. And the reason why we're eliminating Bill Clinton is because he was the prime negotiator, and it was one of his signature campaign promises was NAFTA. And as we've seen, that hasn't worked out too well for the United States in the long run, as most of our manufacturing jobs have left.
We have Nixon and Ford, and we just spoiled the next one.
FDR wins the next part.
Thanks, Caleb.
FDR versus McKinley. All right. So FDR was a big proponent of what he called the Good Neighbor Policy, which was basically a plan for the United States to develop better relations with Latin America. This is especially good because the United States, up till that time, had been viewed as kind of a bad neighbor in Latin America. We'll get into that a little bit later on. So next we have William McKinley. Now, his presidency was during the Spanish-American War, which the United States won and liberated Cuba from Spanish misrule, which was obviously a really good thing. But the reason why we're eliminating McKinley is because that his administration was home to a really high tariff, which arguably did not affect the rest of the world well. It helped the United States to some degree, but a lot of foreign competitors weren't able to enter the U.S. markets. That sounded smart, right?
It did sound smart. Do you want me to click the... Oh, no, we already have FDR up there. I wonder whose fault that was, Caleb.
You're the one that...
Go to the next one,
Oh,
Caleb.
next one. Okay, so we have Harry S. Truman versus Woodrow Wilson. All right, so now, Woodrow Wilson, he was... Oh, yeah, so... Truman was kind of forced to be, he arguably began the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And he was sort of forced into it, but he did a very good job of matching the Soviets and being on pace with them and developing arms and politically countering them in certain areas. And Woodrow Wilson, on the other hand, after he won World War I, he handled the European nations with very good diplomacy. He sort of managed to remain on good terms with most of the nations in Europe. And the reason why we're eliminating Truman is because he had one quote, I believe you said this, where he said something like he regarded the atom bomb as like just another weapon. He likened it to a bullet, that the U.S. could use it when it would be helpful to them.
I did say that. Pretty smart of me, wasn't it?
I think
Say it was smart, Caleb.
Looked it up.
Do you want a paycheck at the end?
Smart.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you very
smart.
much. And for that reason, the winner
Really
is Woodrow Wilson. Okay, going up next on my side of the board, thank God, is Teddy Roosevelt versus JFK. Now this one's a doozy, viewers. Teddy Roosevelt versus JFK. How do you fit so much personality into one bracket, Caleb? That's a rhetorical question. You're not supposed to answer that, okay? I'll talk to you afterwards. All right, so JFK, one of the biggest things he's known for before, his life ended, very unfortunately for American diplomacy, is that he was able to bring the Cuban Missile Crisis to a halt. Something that requires much diplomatic skills, needed those. A lot of charisma, A lot of
You
charm.
have a lot of charisma.
I told you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Anyway, so JFK brought the Cuban Missile Crisis to a halt. Meanwhile, Teddy Roosevelt, not the best neighbor, especially when it comes to the Roosevelt corollary. Now, the Roosevelt corollary kind of goes both ways, double-edged sword, as Caleb wisely pointed out for once in his entire life. The Roosevelt corollary was able to keep European nations from mucking up the Latin American states down south of the glorious USA. But it also caused bad relations between the Latin American countries, most notably Mexico, stating that we could go in there pretty much whenever we desired. So it was thus known as the bad neighbor policy, and that puts Teddy Roosevelt on the bottom of our list, and JFK advances. Sorry about that, Big Ted. The next matchup we have is Reagan versus LBJ. Now Reagan, spoiler alert, Reagan's gonna win. Reagan had strong political rhetoric, yet he proceeded diplomatically in the way that he talked, most notably in his Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall speech. LBJ, his foreign policy, not the best when you get into it. His Vietnam policy is often seen as rather reckless, a lot of lives lost, and it seems that he was pressured to make a lot of the decisions that he did. For that reason, we have Reagan taking the final spot of that bracket. Caleb? No, stop. You go.
Okay, thanks, Russ.
No problem.
Okay, so moving on to the next part of our bracket. Again, this is our weakest division over here. We have the 1920s Republicans versus the combined administrations of Nixon and Ford. So, the 1920s Republicans, during the administration of Herbert Hoover, the Secretary of State, passed what was known as the Simpson Doctrine, which stated that the U.S. would not recognize Japanese territorial conquests in China. And this can definitely be viewed as a good thing in one light, because it's definitely a good thing, because it sort of countered it was the United States counter against Japanese aggression in Asia. Okay, and then moving on again for Nixon, we had, I didn't write anything down for that.
You didn't write anything down for Nixon?
No, can you do it?
Can I do Nixon and Ford?
Yeah.
Can I do Nixon and Ford? And as always, the apprentice goes crawling back to the master. Nixon and Ford. Woo-wee. First of all, since Caleb already screwed up, let's see who wins this one. Are you kidding me? Why is my Minecraft folder coming out? Caleb, I want you to fix this as soon as we're done.
I'm sorry, we're experiencing technical difficulties. Please come back later.
All right, welcome back to the show. Sorry about one of the co-hosts just having a little brain fart day. You know how that goes. Are you ready now, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, Caleb's now ready. We're going to take it back with 20s representatives and Nixon and Ford.
Okay, I found something good about Nixon and Ford, was that Gerald Ford, under his administration, the U.S. finally pulled out of Vietnam, and I think we're regarding this as a good thing because the U.S. really wasn't that successful in Nam. We had a lot of heavy losses and we didn't gain very much. And then, moving on, so Nixon and Ford will be winning in this round, and we are eliminating the 1920s reps because they all of them expressed a very isolationist sentiment. This is exemplified in the Hawley-Smoot tariff of 1930. It's the highest tariff in U.S. history. And all this isolationism wasn't very good for the political climate of Europe. And there's a lot of chaos, and you could argue that World War II happened as a result, partly, of this. And moving on to FDR versus Woodrow Wilson. The interesting thing about this one is that FDR really kind of learned from Woodrow Wilson's mistakes. Woodrow Wilson, he, after World War I, which he obviously won, which was good foreign policy, he also attempted to construct the League of Nations. But the League of Nations failed because Wilson, he gave a very partisan foreign policy. Congress was sort of divided over his foreign policy decisions, and this was something FDR did not replicate. During his administration, foreign policy in the United States was very much bipartisan. And all right, back to you, Russ.
All right.
How did I do?
You did great, Caleb, all right?
Thanks, Russ.
Still not getting a pay raise, but good job. All right, JFK. JFK and Ronald Reagan. How, in God's good name, do you fit so much personality into one matchup? I tell you.
said that already.
I said that already?
Yeah, you said
Did I already say that I'm cutting your pay too? Because I'm doing that also.
No.
Sorry about that.
Authorized?
Anyways, JFK versus Reagan. Let's see how this one goes, ladies and gentlemen. Whew, we're starting off with a good point for each. JFK brought us further involvement in Vietnam. Good and bad when you're looking at it from the side that we need to defend our democracy. We need to show the world who's boss, who controls everything. America. But bad in the sense we're losing troops. You know, some controversial things are going on in Vietnam, obviously during the war. So that can be taken both sides. And also, you know, JFK's Bay of Pigs invasion wasn't the most successful. So already JFK's off to a little shaky start. But then Ronald Reagan comes back with that strong iron fist with Star Wars. Shows the Soviets where they can stick it and when they can stick it. But also doing it diplomatically, rather subtly. So for that reason, we're having Reagan go in the final spot on my side. Caleb, take it away. Let's finish this.
All right, now we're moving on to Nixon and Ford versus FDR. Now, a good thing, the positive for FDR is that FDR, during his administration, he began the development of the atom bomb, which eventually led to, arguably, the end of World War II, which is a very, very forward-thinking move from this president.
Yeah.
And so moving on to Nixon and Ford, we're mainly talking about Richard Nixon here. He advocated a policy of what he called Vietnamization, that's something.
I thought you knew how to pronounce it, Caleb.
Sorry, sir. Vietnamization, which was basically descaling United States involvement in Iran and Vietnam and slowly starting to pull out. Thanks, Russ. But the thing about this is that Vietnamization was the policy he publicly advocated, but behind the public's back, he secretly invaded Cambodia, which was a neutral country. And when this was found out, this caused the United States to be viewed in a very, very bad light. And so for that reason, we have Nixon and Ford being eliminated, and FDR moving on to the final spot.
2v1, Nixon and Ford versus FDR. That's not fair. I'm glad FDR took it.
Russ?
Yes, sir.
Can I do this one?
You think you can handle it?
Yeah.
You know what? Take it away. I believe you can. You got it.
Thank you, Russ.
Alright, I can do it better. Sorry. After you.
Okay. So, here we have the Clash of the Titans. We have arguably the two best foreign policy presidents in United States history. We have Ronald Reagan versus Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, both of them were credited with handling the United States very skillfully during two of its biggest conflicts. Neither one of them was the actual president when these conflicts ended, but their influence in both of these conflicts cannot be understated. Reagan was a huge factor behind the eventual downfall of the Soviet Union and the victory of the United States over Soviet communism. FDR shepherded the United States through one of its darkest times, World War II, and brought an end to the Nazi regime and the Empire of Japan. Now, obviously, both of them are amazing presidents, but in terms of who had the best foreign policy, you have to look at the implications of the conflicts themselves. Now, World War II was obviously a huge conflict and the stakes were very high, but the stakes were arguably higher during the Cold War, as in both the United States and the Soviet Union had thousands of missiles pointed at each other, which could have at any second brought an end to the world as we know it. And that is why, because the stakes were somewhat higher in the Cold War, we have Ronald Reagan going.
Would you like to do the
for the win? Yes, I would.
Other click.
Other click.
Just click anywhere. Doesn't matter. Ronald Reagan, everybody. For the win. Can we get the U.S. national anthem playing in the background? I think that's a good idea.
You shouldn't say that while the camera's...
I forgot this was a live show. Ronald Reagan!